Okay, we'll go ahead and get started here. So we have a quiz today. It's been posted for you to take at your leisure. If we, get to a stopping point in what we're talking about today, we could end early or open up that time to work on the quiz while I'm still, present for the Zoom. So if you have any questions you want to ask me immediately, you can. Otherwise, I have the settings of the quiz set up to where when you hit submit, it's not going to tell you your score immediately, and it's not going to tell you which ones are correct and which ones are wrong. I'll review that later today and send that stuff back. Your grades will be updated by the end of today. Okay, that's one of my priorities on my list of things to do today. But that being said, with the quiz grades, you can go back and edit. So if you don't finish in if you start working on it on one time at one point, and something happens and you can't finish, just go ahead and click submit. As long as you have just go ahead and click submit, and then come back. You'll have until the end of the day to finalize any of your answers. And then for the quiz that's today, I'll get those grades back to y'all tomorrow. Okay, after the deadline is passed, because I don't want to start grading it if someone has clicked submit, but they haven't finished taking it yet, right? So clear deadlines and things like that. So today we're going into homeowners insurance. This include, and so you may originally think or initially think, well, homeowners insurance, that's for when I get a house, or I don't have to worry about that for at least 5 to 10 years, right? Depending on going off to college and then earning enough money to afford a down payment. But one aspect of homeowners insurance also covers renters insurance, which you may choose to get for your home or for your apartment in college or dorm in college. Just from my experience, I think I showed you all the pictures of what happened to my apartment at UT. The hailstorm that came in and kind of crashed out my window. That was pretty bad. God was with me on that one, because I had left my bed to go watch the storm. And the minute, I was only gone from the bed a minute, that's when the window broke and shards of glass landed all over my bed. And there was a piece of hail that big at the foot of my bed. But it damaged my computer and all that. I didn't have renter's insurance, so I had to cover all the damage of my personal property, buying a new computer and things like that. But renter's insurance could help you with that. I also had a bike stolen in college. That tends to be a common occurrence, bike theft, especially at some colleges more than others. UT was, bike theft happened a lot on it. Okay, but bike theft would or other theft of your property would be covered by renter's insurance. Okay, so one part of your homeowner's insurance is to protect your property, your items, but it also protects you from liability insurance. If someone is visiting your home and they injure themselves on your property, you could be liable for that, and you could be liable for their medical. For example, sidewalks. If you have a sidewalk coming up to your home, and the concrete is not aligned, right? And y'all have all seen that, right? Concrete sidewalks that are misaligned. Like one has settled more than others, and it creates these hazards of walking. Someone's walking up to your door they trip over that and they, break their ankle or something, you could be liable for it because that's a hazard on your property. And so as the property owner, you're responsible for it. So homeowners insurance is not just about protecting yourself or protecting your investment of the home and your property. It's also about protecting you from being sued. Lawsuits that could come when other people injure themselves on your property. Okay. One of the big kind of recurring themes with insurance, the more protection you have, what's going to happen to your premiums? Yeah, they're going to go up, right? The more protection that you have, the higher your premiums are going to be. So let's take a look at this article that I had posted on our Google Classroom page yesterday. I'll pull it up. It is a long article. It's actually an excerpt out of one of my graduate books. Okay. So it's 14 pages long. Just have it all read by Monday. Okay. No Cornell notes needed on it. Just go through and read it. Okay. So kind of talked a little bit about personal injuries, liability. Okay. But I want to spend some time looking at the base coverages. Okay. So essentially there are two major levels of, it has it organized here as levels of coverage. One is a named peril. What's a peril? Not apparel, but a peril.
Like negative connotation meaning bad.
Okay, yeah, is it a risk? Okay, yeah. If you're on a small boat in choppy waters, are you at peril? Yeah, you are. Peril of capsizing, right? So it's a risk. Insurance is all about risk and transferring risk. The more risk that you choose to transfer over to the insurance company, the higher your premiums are going to be. The more risk you choose to plan for yourself, the lower your insurance premiums are going to be. Okay, so two major coverages are a named perils coverage policy that includes a named perils, and the other one is an open perils coverage. Okay, policies that are either open perils or named perils. Named perils will only protect you, a named perils coverage insurance plan will only protect you from the list of dangers they list that are listed out in the plan. Okay, so this is all that we include. Okay, fire, lightning, windstorm, hail. Okay, aircraft, right? So a plane crashes on your house. If you have a named perils plan that covers aircraft, you're covered on that. Okay. The open perils is kind of doing it the opposite way. An open perils plan says we will cover everything except what's on this list. Okay. So the named perils says we're only covering this list. The open peril says we're covering everything but what's on this list. Which one do you think is going to be more expensive?
The one where it's a list.
The named?
Open.
What did you say, Leo?
Open.
Yeah, it's going to be the open perils one. The one that excludes certain things, because on the exclusion list, If damage to your property was not caused by one of the items that's on that list, insurance is covering it. Okay. If damage was caused by one of the items on the list, it's not covering it. So it's a much broader policy. It's going to be more expensive. Okay. Now there do tend to be some items on an insurance policy that are generally excluded from both a named and a open perils plan. And those are things like movement of the ground. So earthquakes. Okay, if you live in North Texas or Oklahoma, you're now experiencing more frequent earthquakes than you ever done before. Anybody know why? Why they've reported earthquakes in northern Texas and Oklahoma?
Nope.
Because California is finally sinking into the ocean.
Nope. It starts with an F, and it's an oil and gas industry.
Fracking? Is that what it's called?
Fracking. Yeah. University, the Oklahoma State University actually did a study on it, and it's not the fracking process itself, but a byproduct from fracking. So all that chemical water that they shoot into the ground to cause the hydraulic fractures to get the oil and gas, when they pump that out, they have to dispose of it. And so they create water like deep in the ground pockets and put that water there because you can't separate out the chemicals. It's essentially tainted water, can't be cleaned. And it's the drilling of those water pockets underground that is causing the earthquakes in northern Texas and Oklahoma, right? So if you live up there and your house gets damaged by an earthquake, no fault of your own, chances are your policy is not going to cover it. You're going to be on the hook for it all. Okay. Ordinance or law, you rarely see that, but I guess that would be something like the government coming in and doing eminent domain. Have y'all talked about eminent domain in government class yet? Okay, so eminent domain is essentially the legal policy that the government can come in and take your property for the greater good. They need to build a road. You can't, and the road that they're building goes right through your property. You cannot refuse to sell. The government will come in and say, okay, we need this property, we're gonna take it. Now they will pay you fair market value for it. So you will be compensated, but you just can't outright refuse to sell. So they use eminent domain. That'd be that, okay. Damage from water. Now this one's interesting and specific, pretty important for us living in the Houston area. If the water tends to come from above, so if you come back up here, let's say there's a windstorm and it rips some shingles off your house and water comes into your house that way, or let's say you have a pipe burst in your house, right? New Jersey, it freezes, doesn't it? If you don't winterize your pipes in New Jersey and a pipe bursts, or maybe it's just an old pipe and it bursts, typically homeowners insurance will cover that. But if the water comes into your house from the ground, so if it builds up into your house, as in the case of a flood, homeowners insurance, a standard homeowners insurance policy will not cover that. Okay, the damage is the same, but where the damage comes from, either from above the house, inside the house, or below the house, that changes the outcome. In certain areas of the country, you need to buy flood insurance. Houston is one of those areas. Certain neighborhoods in Houston will need to buy flood insurance. Galveston, flood insurance because the storm surge coming in, right? But those flood insurance policies tend to be subsidized by the government, because if they weren't subsidized, the insurance rates, the premiums would be so high, no one would be able to afford to live in places like Galveston, where every year they may have to rebuild the house. Like, that's kind of crazy. Okay. Let's see some other things that are typically excluded from homeowners insurance policies. War and nuclear hazard. If we go to war with Canada and Canada bombs New Jersey, sorry, Anthony, you're not covered. You're not protected. Okay. Let's see, power failure. Yeah, they're not going to cover that. Let's see, intentional acts. So if, okay, this one we hear a lot with insurance fraud. If a loss is discovered to be an intentional act on the part of any insured, it is not covered. Okay, so if you feel like you can burn down your house to collect the insurance, no, not going to cover. Okay, and then neglect. That would be, let's say, you have a tree next to your garage, and lightning had hit that tree, and you can see that a limb could fall onto a large limb could fall onto your garage, causing damage, but you choose not to take care of that. Are you being negligent? Yeah. And then let's say a couple months go by, you're being negligent for a couple months now, and it finally snaps, gives way, and falls into your garage. Insurance company is not going to pay out on that, because their position is essentially, dude, you could have prevented this damage just through reasonable care. You chose not to. That was a choice you made. We're not paying out. It's reasonable, right? Right. It would be determinant on whether the insurance company could prove that you were negligent, right? So if they had evidence that you waited 2 months, they're going to be successful in not paying out. Okay. All right. So homeowners insurance comes with these different sections, different types of coverage. And this can be a little confusing. So I'm actually going to put together a little PowerPoint for y'all that kind of summarizes, and hopefully I'll have that posted by Friday. Okay. But there are two sections here. Section 1, coverage, and then section, scrolling down. Section 2, coverage. Section 1 deals with property. Section 2 deals with liability, essentially. Okay. So let's kind of go through it, A through F. Coverage A, if your insurance policy contains coverage A, then they are going to cover your residential dwelling, where you live, or where people can live. Okay. And they're either going to pay, cannot speak. They're either going to pay for the repair or replacement. So replacement damage or replacement tends to be a little higher than the actual cash value here, because what do homes do over time? Typically, they go up in value, right? So the cost of building a new home will go up in value. So maybe more so than the actual cost of the house, the actual cash value. So replacement cost tends to be a little higher. But coverage A is going to cover damage done to the dwelling, to where people live. Okay. You don't have to worry about the math. We're not going to do any of the math for this class on calculating actual cash value or amount of loss and all of this. Yeah. Coverage B is covering other structures that are not attached to the dwelling. So if you have a detached garage, it's not going to be covered. If you have a shed in the backyard, it's not going to be covered. Anything else that's on the property that's a structure that is not your dwelling will require coverage B. Okay, if you have an insurance policy that only has coverage A, you're not going to be covered for B. Okay. Coverage C, think of it as everything inside the home, everything that you own inside the home. Okay, it's your personal property. Yeah, right here, this includes property, or this property includes furniture, clothing, electronics. What do you foresee as kind of a a difficulty having coverage C, like in terms of getting the insurance to pay out for coverage C? What could be a difficulty here?
A car.
Well, a car is going to be homeowners, or sorry, a car is going to be auto insurance. So homeowners insurance is not going to cover a car. But here we have an insurance. I'm sorry?
Proof.
Proof. How many of y'all have a list of everything that you own in your home? So if your home were to catch fire and everything goes up in smoke, insurance company comes to you and says, hey, give us a list of all your personal property. How many people do you think are actually going to be able to come up with that list? That's kind of difficult, isn't it? I mean, I probably couldn't do it with even the stuff in my closet, right? It may be a good idea, a prudent thing for the homeowner to start taking inventory of what they own. Okay, even for y'all are about to go off to college. So when you start off, your possessions are going to be fairly minimal. Keeping a little inventory of what you own may be helpful in the event that something bad happens. But I understand that's not always practical. So a lot of times the insurance company will kind of do an estimate. Do you think that they're going to give you an estimate in which they overpay you, or do they tend to underpay you? I'm probably going to tend to underpay you because, again, with insurance companies, the less they pay out, the better for them. Okay. Now, with personal property, there are some limits on personal properties. Okay. For example, this is just typical. Each homeowner's insurance policy could vary. Okay. But they're only going to pay up to $200 of cash or currency. So you have a safe filled with $10,000. If it goes up in smoke, well, they're only going to pay about $200 for it. Okay. And that kind of goes to proof, right? If your house burns down and there's no evidence left, the insurance company has to take your word that you had $10,000 in cash. That's going to be like, they're going to be like, yeah, we're not going to pay out that. Okay. Loss of business, we're not going to worry about that. Okay. Collections, airline tickets, papers, things like that, only going to be up to $1,500. Your jewelry or your wife's jewelry, or precious metals, real furs, they're only going to do $1,500 for that. So if you say, let's say you have a lot more jewelry, or you have a lot of jewelry that's worth more than $1,500, what do you think you need to do to make sure that all of that jewelry is covered?
Like make a
Just
list.
take a guess.
Take pictures of it.
Okay, you're going to make a list, take pictures of it, but this insurance policy is still only going to pay out $1,500. It's going to limit it. So what do you think you should do? Do you think you could get a separate insurance policy to just on the jewelry? Yeah, yeah. I mean, all insurance is transferring risk from one person to another person. So some insurance company out there will be willing to sell you a policy that provides you additional protection. You just have to pay the premiums for it. Okay. Watercraft. Okay, your jet ski, all right, or trailers and equipment, $1,500. Again, that kind of goes along the same lines of, if you have an expensive jet ski, you need to take out an additional insurance policy on it if you want it covered. Okay. $1,500 loss of electronic equipment. $2,500 loss or theft of firearms. Okay, so if you have a lot of firearms, probably a good idea to get a policy to cover them. They're there. So they do set up a, there are limits on personal property. And if you want to go above that limit, you have to pay more for it. Okay. Now there are certain things that are completely excluded from coverage C. Like they're not gonna cover this at all. You have to buy an additional policy for them. Animals, birds, and fish. Okay. Motorized land vehicles used off premises. So if you have an ATV, or or like a tractor or something, get your own separate policy on that. It's not going to be in your basic policy. Aircraft and parts. So y'all know where Fulsher is? Have y'all heard of Fulsher? I know Amari has.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right. So out in Fulsher, there's this one neighborhood. It's off 359. And they actually, you have houses there, but they have their own private airstrip. And so each house has its own aircraft hangar, and people can take their aircrafts out. Like, it's unusual, but all that aircraft needs to be on its own policy. All right. So one of the, and I'm not going to go through all of this here, but one of the big kind of central ideas behind these things that are excluded, they tend to exclude property that should have its own insurance plan. Okay, if you want it protected. Okay. Coverage D is loss of use. Something happens to your home, you can't live there, or something happens to your apartment, you can't live there. Loss of use is going to help you pay for a hotel or pay for subsequent housing while your property gets paid or gets fixed. If you don't have coverage D, you're going to be paying for that out of pocket, right? But if you have coverage D, you're going to be paying a higher premium for it. Okay. All right, we will stop there. We'll talk about E and F. Actually, let's cover E and F real quick because it's short, and then we'll stop afterwards. After that. So this is your personal liability. So let's say you have some friends over and you've left, maybe there's your handrail on your stairs is loose, and you've been meaning to fix it, but you know it's the danger, but guests really don't know. Can you expect guests to know of a danger that's kind of hidden, like the handrail being loose, without you telling them? No. So someone's walking up the stairs, they lean on the handrail a little bit too much, and they fall, break their arm. You're personally liable for that, as they injured themselves on your property, and it was a hidden danger. Okay. If it's a danger that's like obvious, you're not going to be liable for that. So let's say they're helping you cook, they're handling a knife, and they cut their hand while cooking. Well, there's obvious a danger if you're handling a knife. You won't be liable for that. But it's the hidden dangers, things that people don't expect, where you could be liable. Okay. So if you don't have personal liability coverage, the guests that hurt themselves could sue you and force you to pay for it. The liability coverage, though, protects you from that. Okay, so you don't have to pay. The property will pay. Okay, if you have dogs, dog property owners, you are responsible for anything that your dog does. Your dog bites someone, you're responsible for that medical care. Okay. New Jersey, patch of ice on sidewalks, you're responsible for keeping your sidewalks clear of the ice. Okay. You don't do that, someone walks up to your house, they slip, fall, hurt themselves, you're going to be liable for it. Okay. And then coverage F, medical payments, it kind of goes hand in hand with coverage E a bit. This paragraph, the second paragraph here, though, talks about the difference. Okay, coverage F covers a no-fault coverage that will automatically pay, whereas coverage E will pay where you are liable. So F is just additional coverage. Okay, so we're going to stop there. On Monday, we're going to be talking about the different forms here. Each of these forms, each of these types of policies will have some combination of the above coverages, A, B, C, D, and E, and F. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about those so that you understand what you should be looking for when shopping around for insurance. Yeah. All right. Any questions? Okay, I know insurance is one of those things that you're like, ugh, but it's a necessary part of adulting. And you're gonna be better prepared to handle the stuff that happens to you if you understand. And you won't be sold crap policies that you really don't need. Because insurance salesmen will try to sell you things that, some insurance salesmen will try to sell you things that you really don't need. Okay. All right, guys, don't forget to take your quiz. I'm going to leave this up and running. I'll go ahead and stop the recording though.